In a world where you never really know who's behind the counter, this story will have you questioning just how much fight hides behind a simple smile. What would you do if you realized the quiet stranger next door could turn into a warrior in a heartbeat? Let us know in the comments section below, and make sure you stick around because this is one story you won't forget. Ryan Thatcher didn't look like the kind of man you notice twice. Faded jeans, an old ball cap pulled low, and a navy blue t-shirt with the name Hudson's Gas stitched over the heart. He moved like the world didn't bother him anymore, each step economical, each glance brief but aware. The way he wiped down the counter, refilled the chip racks, and rang up diesel for the truckers coming off Route 9, it was easy to mistake him for just another drifter who found a patch of dirt to cling to. No one ever asked what he'd done before. No one ever asked why his right wrist bore faint scars or why his left hand seemed too steady, too precise, even when counting change. The station sat on the edge of nowhere, a forgotten pinprick between larger towns, surrounded by fields that bowed in the endless wind. It wasn't much, but it was Ryan's now. After the things he'd seen, after the blood and the sand and the long, sleepless nights, perched on rooftops half a world away, this place offered him a kind of silence he didn't think he deserved but was too tired to refuse. The inside of Hudson's Theoli smelled like old coffee and motor oil, the kind of scent that clung to your clothes and filled the gaps in your memory if you let it. Ryan didn't mind. He'd built himself a life out of small, simple habits. Open the station at 6, close it at midnight, fix what broke, stay unseen. Only a handful of regulars knew his name, and even they barely got more than a nod. He liked it that way. He needed it that way. That night the quiet was thicker than usual. No trucks rumbled in. No ranchers needed propane. Just Ryan, the ticking clock, and the faint buzz of the neon sign outside. It wasn't until the bell over the door jangled sharp and quick that he looked up, the worn cloth still in his hand. 3 figures slipped inside, young men, maybe 20s. One tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a battered black hoodie, another with a twitch in his neck, eyes flickering like he was scanning for invisible threats. The third, lean and wiry, with a beanie jammed low on his head and a too-wide grin that never touched his eyes. Ryan's gaze swept them once, sharp and unseen, cataloging details. No car outside. Hoodie's right hand dipped too often into his jacket, nervous or armed. Twitchy Kid kept glancing at the security cameras, calculating. Beanie lingered near the coffee station, fidgeting, but positioning himself near the side door. Not customers, not even amateurs. Predators who thought they were wolves walking into a pen full of sheep. Ryan said nothing. He didn't need to. He let them move around the store, pretending to browse, but he subtly shifted his own stance. Feet shoulder-width apart, weight distributed evenly. Eyes never straying too long from any one of them. His right hand, always casual, now rested just beside the silent alarm hidden beneath the counter. Beanie picked up a Snickers bar and peeled back the wrapper with jerky fingers. "Hey, man," he said, voice too loud, too friendly. "How much for this?" Ryan tapped the price sticker without a word. Beanie laughed like it was the funniest thing he'd heard all day. Twitchy moved closer to the register, hands shoved deep in his pockets. Tall Viddy spoke next, voice low and rough. "You the only one here tonight, old man?" Ryan stared at him, measured the question for what it was. A probe. Not how much is gas or where's the bathroom. "You the only one here?" Wheeler said. Ryan gave a slow nod. The air shifted, molecules tightening between heartbeats. Beanie tossed the candy bar onto the floor. Twitchy pulled his hands from his jacket. One clutched a knife, the blade glinting beneath the fluorescent lights. Hoodie reached behind his back, pulling out a compact black pistol. Sloppy grip, trigger finger already tensed. "Touch the register," Hoodie ordered, stepping forward. "And don't get stupid," vacated. Ryan's body didn't move, but inside him, old gears clanked awake. The years peeled away like smoke. He wasn't standing behind a gas station counter anymore. He was lying prone on a rooftop under a desert sun, scope pressed to his cheek, heart pounding in the timeless rhythm of life and death. He could see it now, the angles, the distances. Theny, closest, wildcard unstable. Twitchy, knife, but scared, already sweating. Hoodie, armed but inexperienced, lazy stance, overconfident. Ryan's eyes, dead and cold, met Hoodie's. "You don't want to do this," Ryan said, voice flat. Hoodie sneered. "You think we won't? This ain't the movies, man. Ain't nobody coming to save you." Ryan didn't smile, didn't blink, just kept his hand right near the panic button, kept his breathing slow, kept the old machine of his mind running numbers and probabilities. "Maybe not," Ryan said quietly, "but you just stepped into the wrong damn station." The door creaked. Not a customer, not salvation. It was Mason Briggs, the gas station owner's nephew, just finishing his night shift at the diner down the road. A kid barely 20, all freckles and nervous smiles, stepping straight into the crossfire. Without a clue. Ryan's gut twisted. He had about 2 seconds to decide. Blow the alarm and risk a firefight with an innocent in the middle, or deal with it the way he was trained. Fast, quiet, precise. Hoodie barked another order, waving the pistol, which he stepped toward Mason. Beanie laughed and shifted his weight, moving toward the counter fast now, hand dipping for something unseen. Ryan's mind screamed move, but his body was already doing it, a perfect machine from another life. Ryan's body moved with a suddenness that didn't match his quiet exterior. His right hand didn't slam the panic button. He crushed it in a single, controlled press, a flick of muscle memory. The silent alarm engaged, a tiny red diode flashing beneath the counter where no one could see. The system would notify the county dispatch within 90 seconds, but Ryan knew the real countdown had already begun. Mason froze near the front display rack, his hands up instinctively when he spotted the weapons. His wide, terrified eyes darted to Ryan like a kid looking for a lifeguard just before the tide pulls him under. He lunged over the counter, emboldened by fear and bravado, reaching for the cash drawer. His fingers brushed the worn handle just as Ryan shifted his weight, one precise step backward, his left elbow slamming upward into Beanie's descending wrist with a sickening crack. The candy thief howled, stumbling back, his knuckles bent at grotesque angles. The pistol in Hoodie's hand jerked up instantly, trained on Ryan now, anger overtaking caution. "Move again, old man, and I'll drop you right here," Hoodie barked, his voice cracking slightly, the mask of control slipping from his face. Ryan's hands stayed open, visible. He needed to buy time, to keep them from realizing reinforcements were already on their way. 90 seconds could feel like an eternity when panic started to rot the edges of a plan. He forced a look of compliance onto his face, lowering his gaze just enough to sell it. Inside, though, the gears kept turning, assessing. Twitchy hurried near Mason, knife bobbing nervously in the air. His stance was wrong, knees too locked, grip too tight. He was scared, not thinking. Dangerous, but predictable. Ryan knew that look too well. It was the same one he'd seen in new recruits on their first night raid, the ones who thought shouting and steel could drown out the screaming fear inside their heads. "You don't want to hurt the kid," Ryan said, voice calm, like he was just suggesting another brand of soda. "Let him go. He's got nothing you want." Twitchy licked his lips, flicking a glance at Hoodie, waiting for orders. "Shut up," Hoodie snapped at Ryan. "Both of you, down on the floor. Now!" Ryan moved slowly, dropping to one knee behind the counter. Mason followed, trembling so hard Ryan could hear his sneakers squeaking on the tile. Beanie nursed his ruined hand, muttering curses under his breath, blood dripping in fat drops onto the floor. The clock in Ryan's head kept ticking. 60 seconds since the button press, maybe less. Hood came around the counter now, emboldened, gun swinging from target to target. Ryan noted the way he held it, one-handed, wrist loose, compensating for adrenaline by trying to look meaner than he was. That kind of posture meant poor aim under stress. Another advantage, another opening. Hoodie kicked the open register drawer with his boot, frustrated at the paltry sum inside. Hudson's wasn't a booming operation. Most of the day's cash had already been dropped into the safe. "Where's the rest?" Hoodie growled, pointing the barrel at Ryan's chest. Ryan glanced up at him, expression blank. "Safe's on a timer. Can't open it until morning." Hoodie sneered, not believing him but not willing to test it either. He ripped a handful of small bills from the drawer and stuffed them into his hoodie pocket. "Get the kid's wallet," he barked at Twitchy, who stumbled forward and started patting Mason down with one hand, knife still trembling in the other. Mason flinched at every touch, too scared to speak, his breath coming in shallow little gasps. Ryan's hands flexed against the cold linoleum, his muscles twitching with the urge to act. But not yet. Not yet. The front door creaked again, and every head in the room snapped toward it. A beat-up Ford truck rolled slowly past the window, the driver an old man chewing gum and squinting at the pumps. No threat, no savior. Ryan caught a glimpse of the sheriff's office decal fading in the distance, still too far, maybe 2-3 minutes out, if they even took the call seriously at first. He needed to end this, now. Ryan exhaled, slow and even. He shifted one knee forward like he was adjusting his weight, but really he was aligning himself, coiled tight, ready. Twitchy found Mason's wallet and tossed it to Hoodie. "Good," Hoodie snarled. "Now, both of you, face down, hands behind your heads." Ryan didn't move, didn't blink. Hoodie stepped closer, emboldened by the scent of victory. His gun dipped lower, close enough now that Ryan could see the slight tremor in his forearm, the subtle hitch in his breathing. Perfect. Ryan exploded off the floor. He twisted his body in a single smooth motion, sweeping his leg out in a brutal arc that smashed into Hoodie's shin. The gunshot roared, deafening in the confined space, but the shot went wild, shattering a fluorescent light above the counter. Ryan was already inside Hoodie's guard, his left hand slapping the gun wrist wide, his right elbow driving into Hoodie's throat with the force of a battering ram. Hoodie gurgled, crumpling backward, the pistol skittering across the tile. Beanie let out a broken scream and bolted for the side door, cradling his ruined hand. But Ryan was faster. His boot caught Beanie squarely in the gut, doubling him over. Ryan pivoted, grabbing a fistful of Beanie's hoodie and yanking him off balance, sending him sprawling headfirst into the magazine rack. Twitchy panicked, lunging forward with the knife. Mason shrieked, throwing himself against the candy aisle. Ryan sidestepped the clumsy stab with a predator's grace, catching Twitchy's wrist mid-swing and twisting hard. The blade clattered to the floor. Twitchy yelped, but Ryan didn't let go. He turned the momentum into a brutal judo throw, slamming the skinny kid onto his back hard enough to rattle the shelves. Ryan stood over them, chest heaving once, twice. Seconds passed. Then sirens screamed into the night, the red and blue strobes painting the dusty windows. Mason stumbled to his feet, still shaking, looking at Ryan like he was seeing him for the first time, like maybe, just maybe, this quiet man behind the counter wasn't who they thought he was at all. Ryan flexed his knuckles slowly, rolling the ache from old bones and old scars. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The cavalry was here now. But the war, the real war, had ended 30 seconds ago, before they ever kicked open that door. And the men who thought they were wolves, they just learned what it was like to try and steal from a man who once hunted monsters for a living. The flashing lights outside painted the station in dizzy bursts of red and blue, every siren wail slicing into the night like a blade. Ryan Thatcher leaned his weight against the counter, arms crossed loosely, watching through the broken front window as the cavalry finally stormed in. Sheriff Linda McCoy was the first through the door, her boots squeaking on the tile. She was sharp-nosed, gray-streaked hair pulled into a low ponytail, service pistol drawn but low at her side. Her gaze swept the scene. The 3 robbers sprawled across the floor. The shattered glass, the scattered magazines, Mason trembling against the chip rack. And then settled on Ryan. Something flickered behind her eyes. The way you look at a storm after it's passed and wonder what could have possibly survived it. "You good?" she asked, voice clipped, already knowing the answer. Ryan nodded once, slow. "They're all yours." Deputies poured in behind her, cuffing the groaning bodies without much ceremony. Beanie whimpered as his broken hand was jostled. Twitchy sobbed quietly as cold steel clamped around his wrists. Hoodie, the one who thought waving a gun made him a king, just lay still, breathing shallow through bruised ribs. McCoy holstered her weapon and stepped closer, boots crunching over the glass. She gave Ryan a once-over, looking for wounds. There was a time, long ago, when Ryan might have been annoyed at the scrutiny. Now he just understood it for what it was. Someone still doing their job, still trying to make sense of the wreckage left behind. Mason started stammering an explanation to one of the deputies, voice high and cracked. McCoy held up a hand to pause him. "Kid," she said, gentle but firm, "go sit in my cruiser. Get warm. We'll get your statement after you catch your breath." Mason nodded, wide-eyed and grateful, stumbling out into the cool air. When the doors swung shut behind him, McCoy turned back to Ryan, folding her arms. "You want to tell me what the hell happened here?" Ryan shrugged. "They picked the wrong station." McCoy barked a short, humorless laugh. "No kidding." Another deputy, a wiry kid barely out of the academy, came over with his notepad ready. "Mr. Thatcher, can you walk us through what you saw?" Ryan eyed him for a second, then shook his head slowly. "You're not going to get it all in a report." The kid blinked, confused. McCoy waved him off. "Go check the security footage," she said. "Make sure we got this locked down." When they were alone, McCoy leaned in a little closer, voice dropping. "Ryan," she said, and there was something different in the way she used his name now, like it meant something heavier, like it rattled differently in the air. "I've seen a lot of clerks in my day. Seen a lot of robberies, too. But what you pulled off in there, that wasn't panic. That wasn't luck." Ryan didn't reply. "You moved like you knew," McCoy said, studying his face. "Knew exactly what was coming, exactly how to end it." Ryan rubbed a hand over his jaw, the rough stubble scratching against his palm. "Old instincts," he said finally. McCoy squinted at him, then nodded slowly, like a puzzle piece just slid into place. "You military?" Ryan hesitated, feeling the old weight settle over his shoulders again. There was no point lying, not anymore. "Yeah," he said. "Navy SEAL." McCoy let out a low whistle. She straightened, hands on her hips, scanning the wreckage one more time. "You're lucky," she said. "A couple wrong moves, and we'd be pulling body bags out of here." Ryan looked at her, eyes hard and tired. Luck had nothing to do with it. For a moment there was silence between them, the only sounds the distant crackle of the radio and the murmuring of deputies cataloging evidence. Finally McCoy sighed and pulled a card from her pocket, sliding it across the counter. "My number," she said. "You remember anything else, you call me. And if you ever need anything else, you call me for that too." Ryan picked up the card, tucking it into his back pocket without looking. "I'll be fine," he said. "Sure you will," McCoy said. But there was no conviction in her voice. The deputies finished loading the robbers into separate cruisers, and soon the parking lot was empty again, just broken glass and broken memories littering the concrete. Ryan stayed behind, sweeping up the shards, patching the window with a sheet of plywood from the maintenance closet, putting the store back together piece by piece like stitching up a wound no one else could see. Hours later, long after the sun peeled itself off the horizon in shy streaks of gray and pink, Ryan sat behind the counter again, the battered coffee pot burbling its ancient song. He cradled a chipped mug between his palms, staring at nothing. He could still smell the fear from earlier, still taste the adrenaline sour on his tongue. He thought about Hoodie's eyes wide with surprise. He thought about Twitchy's knife clattering to the floor. He thought about Beanie's scream when his wrist snapped sideways. Ryan pressed his thumb against the rim of the mug, grinding away an invisible fleck of dust. He hadn't wanted any of this. He hadn't wanted to hurt anyone, ever again. That was why he came here, to a place so empty you could hear the corn breathe at night. But violence had a way of finding men like him, like a scent clinging to old clothes. No matter how many times you washed them, no matter how many new lives you built, it always stayed. The door chime jingled. Ryan looked up automatically, muscles tight, ready. But it wasn't another gang. It wasn't another test. It was Charlie Dawson, the owner of Hudson's Gas, big and round and sweating through his button down, even in the early morning chill. "You okay, Ryan?" Charlie asked, breathing a little hard from the short walk. Ryan nodded once. Charlie shuffled forward, peering around at the boarded-up window, the rearranged shelves. "Heard what happened," Charlie said. "Linda called me. Said you saved the station, saved the kid, too." Ryan shrugged. "Just did what I had to." Charlie scratched at his balding head, looking uncomfortable. "You did more than that," he said gruffly. "Way more. I owe you. The town owes you." Ryan didn't know what to say to that. He wasn't used to being owed anything anymore. Charlie fidgeted a moment longer, then pulled something from his pocket, a small, weathered patch, dark blue with gold stitching. Ryan's throat tightened before he even saw what it was. It was an old Navy SEAL trident patch, slightly frayed at the edges. "Found this in the back room a few weeks ago," Charlie said. "Old keepsake from my brother. He served too. Thought you might appreciate it more than me." Ryan stared at the patch, the gold anchor, the eagle, the trident and pistol, gleaming faintly in the weak morning light. He reached out and took it, fingers trembling slightly. "Thanks," he said, voice rough. Charlie nodded once, then shuffled back toward the door. "You ever need time off, you just say the word," he said, not looking back. "Or if you need anything else." The bell jingled again, and Ryan was alone. He stared at the patch in his hand for a long time, feeling the weight of it, the memories stitched into every thread. He thought he'd buried that part of himself. But maybe some ghosts didn't want to sleep. Maybe some ghosts still had work left to do. Ryan tucked the patch into his pocket next to McCoy's card. Then he poured himself another cup of coffee and waited for the next sunrise. The morning after the robbery, word spread faster than wildfire through the town's arteries. By noon, Hudson's Gas was busier than it had been in months, not with customers but with faces, curious ones, grateful ones, a few carrying casseroles wrapped in foil and worry stitched across their brows. Ryan Thatcher didn't want attention. He didn't want the hushed whispers or the sidelong glances, but here it was anyway, settling on his shoulders like an unwanted coat. Jenny from the diner brought over a thermos of coffee and 2 slices of pecan pie. Mason's mother came in, eyes red from crying, and hugged Ryan so hard he thought his ribs might crack. The old pastor from the next county dropped off a battered Bible with a note tucked inside. "You are not alone." Ryan kept his thinkies short, his smiles even shorter. He patched the window, restocked the shelves, cleaned up the bloodstains with bleach, and silence. He tried to pretend that everything was normal again. It wasn't. When the clock hit 8, the station emptied, the parade of kindness trickled down to nothing but dust and memory. Ryan stood behind the counter, arms crossed, eyes scanning the horizon through the plywood. It wasn't just about the 3 idiots who tried to rob him. It was about who sent them. Ryan wasn't a fool. He knew organized trouble when he saw it. Hoodie and his crew weren't smart enough to pick a random spot like Hudson's. They were sent. A test, maybe. A probe. Which meant someone bigger was watching, and they wouldn't like how the test ended. The sun dipped behind the fields, bleeding gold into the earth. Ryan locked the doors early, flipped the sign to closed, and sat in the back room, polishing the battered CS-45 he hadn't touched in 3 years. He slid a fresh magazine into place with a soft click, feeling the weight settle into his palm. Old instincts resurfaced, cold and precise. He didn't want war. He never did. But when war comes to your doorstep, you don't argue with it, you survive it. At exactly 9:15, the door rattled. Not a knock, a rattle. A deliberate sound like someone testing the lock, seeing how much give it had. Ryan moved silently, boots whispering across the linoleum. He pressed himself flat against the wall beside the door, heartbeat steady as a metronome. Through the sliver of glass, he saw them, two figures standing just outside the frame, one tall, broad-shouldered, the other wiry and shifting from foot to foot. Not cops. Not locals. Wrong posture, wrong energy. Ryan waited, listening, feeling. The shorter one leaned closer to the door and said, too softly for normal ears, "You sure he's here?" The tall one grunted. "Truck's out back, lights are off, he's here." Ryan could smell it now, not fear, not exactly, but tension, coiled and ugly. "You want to knock again?" The wiry one whispered. "No," the tall one said. "We wait. Boss says if he don't show, we burn the place." Ryan's jaw tightened. There it was. The confirmation he needed. He slid back into the shadows of the store, silent, thinking. If they were patient, if they waited all night, eventually they'd get tired, maybe light a fire, maybe decide to come in guns hot. Either way, someone would get hurt, maybe some innocent trucker passing through, maybe Mason if he swung by before his morning shift at the diner. Ryan flexed his hands once, twice, or he couldn't wait. He had to move first. He slipped out the back door, closing it soundlessly behind him. The night wrapped around him like an old cloak, familiar and heavy. The two men were still at the front, muttering low. Ryan crept along the side wall, careful of the gravel crunching underfoot. When he was 10 feet away, he spoke. Voice low, deadly calm. "Looking for me?" The tall one whirled first, his jacket riding up just enough to flash the butt of a handgun tucked at his waist. At mistake. Ryan moved like a whisper of violence. 3 quick strides, and his forearm smashed into the tall man's throat, driving the air from his lungs with a strangled gasp. The wiry one yelped and fumbled for something in his pocket. A knife, maybe. But Ryan was faster. He grabbed a fistful of the man's jacket and slammed him against the rusted propane cage, the sound sharp and ugly in the empty night. The tall one crumpled to his knees, coughing, spitting. Ryan pressed the wiry one harder against the cage, his voice cold enough to crack stone. "Who sent you?" The man whimpered. We just worked for Eddie, man. Eddie Voss. We didn't know you were..." Ryan's blood ran colder. Eddie Voss. A name he hadn't heard in years. Back before Hudson's. Back before he'd tried to bury who he was. Voss wasn't some petty thug. He was connected. Gangs, drugs, guns. A cancer that spread through towns like this, feeding on their loneliness. Ryan leaned closer. "You tell Voss," he said, each word etched with iron. "If he wants me, he'd better come himself." The wiry man nodded frantically. Ryan stepped back, letting the kid slump to the ground. The tall one dragged himself upright, wheezing through bruised lungs. "Go," Ryan said. They stumbled into the darkness, not looking back. Ryan watched until their shadows dissolved into the cornfields. Then he exhaled, slow and grim. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. If Eddie Voss knew he was here, if Voss had already sent a warning shot, and the next move wouldn't be some scared kids in the night. It would be a reckoning. Ryan wiped his bloody knuckles on his jeans and turned back toward the station. He had work to do. He locked the doors again, checked the cameras, reloaded the .45. He mapped the exits in his mind, ran the angles, thought through fallback plans he hoped he wouldn't need. The gas station wasn't just a job anymore. It was a fortress. And Ryan Thatcher, the quiet man behind the counter, the one who just wanted to be left alone, was going back to war. The town woke up slow the next morning, the same as always. Early coffee runs, school buses yawning to life, farmers dusting off their pickups. To them, the world was simple, safe. Ryan Thatcher watched it all through the cracked blinds of the gas station office, feeling the widening gap between himself and that kind of peace. Eddie Voss knew where he was now. It was only a matter of time. The morning slipped by under a sky heavy with gray clouds. Ryan moved through the station like a man possessed, reinforcing the back doors, double-checking the camera feeds, slipping extra rounds into his pockets like a man laying sandbags before the flood. At 10:30, Mason showed up. Ryan caught his approach on the feed. The kid jogging up the gravel drive, backpack slung over one shoulder, face lit up with some kind of stubborn optimism. Ryan unlocked the door before Mason could even knock. "Hey, Mr. Thatcher," Mason said, out of breath. "I brought you something." Ryan stepped aside, letting him in. Mason pulled a battered duffel bag from his backpack and unzipped it. Inside were sandwiches, bottled water, a handful of protein bars. "I figured you might be busy today," Mason said, trying for casual but failing. "After, everything." Ryan stared at the bag a moment longer than he needed to. The gesture punched harder than any bullet. "Thanks," Ryan said, voice rougher than he intended. Mason grinned and shifted awkwardly, looking around. "You, expecting more trouble?" Ryan didn't lie. "Yeah." Mason's face tightened, but he nodded like he understood something bigger than Ryan could put into words. "You need help?" Mason asked. Ryan almost laughed. "Almost. I need you to stay safe," he said instead. Mason looked like he wanted to argue, but thought better of it. Ryan clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Go home. Lock your doors. Keep your head down." The kid hesitated, then nodded once, hard. "Good luck, Mr. Thatcher." Ryan watched him go, the kid's sneakers kicking up little clouds of dust as he disappeared down the road. When the door shut again, the quiet inside the station was absolute. Ryan sat behind the counter, watching the security feeds, letting the clock crawl by. Waiting, or planning. The old instincts sharpened until the world around him narrowed to angles and exits, threats and opportunities. He didn't want blood. He didn't want to pull the trigger again. But he had already made peace with that long ago. In deserts and jungles, in nameless alleys where the air stank of gunpowder and regret. Out there you didn't kill because you hated what was in front of you. You killed because you loved what was behind you. Ryan ran a hand down his face, feeling every scar like Braille, reading a story that had never really ended. The wind shifted outside, picking up grit and dust, rattling the plywood on the broken window. The first truck came into view just after noon. Black Chevy, tinted windows, front bumper dinged and rusted like a battering ram. Ryan watched it crawl into the lot and idle by pump 2. No plates. Just no movement inside. Ryan's muscles coiled tight. 30 seconds later, a second truck, blue Ford, tires too wide, engine snarling like a caged animal. It pulled up behind the first, boxing the lot. 2 men got out of each truck. Not kids this time. Men built like wolves, shoulders heavy with muscle, faces hard and impassive. The kind of men who didn't hesitate, the kind who didn't blink when things got messy. Ryan caught the glint of pistols tucked into waistbands, the heavy sag of body armor under jackets. His heart slowed to a steady, lethal rhythm. Showtime. But the men didn't knock. They didn't shout. They just walked straight toward the door, confident, casual. Ryan let them get close enough to see the reflection of themselves in the glass. Then he threw the first punch. The back door exploded outward as Ryan kicked it open from the inside, moving like a ghost from a nightmare, the .45 already raised and steady. The first man spun at the noise, too slow. Ryan shot once, a clean, controlled burst, and the man dropped to his knees, his sidearm clattering to the asphalt. The second man dove behind the pump, drawing and firing wild. Glass shattered. The smell of gasoline curled into the air. Ryan ducked low, moving laterally, 2 quick shots snapping off from his pistol. One pinged off the pump, the other smashed through the Ford's rear window. The remaining 2 men bolted, fanning out, trying to flank him. Ryan slid into cover behind a concrete barrier, breathing hard through his nose. He didn't have long. Reinforcements. Maybe more trucks. Maybe Voss himself. This wasn't about surviving the next 30 seconds. This was about ending it before the town, before the people like Mason got caught in the crossfire. Ryan waited for the next volley of gunfire, waited for the shout. Instead, a voice cut across the lot. Amplified, mocking. "Right, Thatcher." It was rough, southern-twanged, dripping with malice. "You got something that belongs to me." Ryan stayed silent. "You think you can hole up in that rat shack forever?" the voice continued. "Think again. We're coming. You got 2 minutes to come out hands up, otherwise we burn you out." Ryan smiled grimly. He didn't know who they were talking to. He moved low, weaving through the back storage room, grabbing the bag he kept under the mop sink. The one marked emergency. Inside, 2 smoke grenades, a flare gun, zip ties, an old Kevlar vest he hadn't worn since Fallujah. He shrugged on the vest, feeling the familiar weight anchor him to the world. No surrender. Ryan cracked the door to the side alley. One of the men stood there, watching the front windows, his rifle loose in his hands. Ryan moved. He crossed the space in 5 strides, slamming his shoulder into the man's spine. The rifle clattered away as Ryan yanked him down into a chokehold, squeezing until the man went limp. 1 down. 3 to go. Ryan scooped up the rifle, checked the chamber, and slipped it over his shoulder. He moved like a wraith now, looping around the side of the station, using the low stone walls and battered dumpsters for cover. The men by the trucks were shouting, gesturing, arguing. Their formation was breaking, panic worming its way in. Ryan popped the first smoke grenade, lobbing it under the Ford. Thick, choking clouds poured out instantly, swallowing the lot in a blinding haze. Confusion erupted. Shouts turned to curses. Ryan moved through the smoke like a ghost, targeting knees and wrists, disabling, not killing. Precision strikes. Fast, efficient. When the smoke cleared, 3 men were writhing on the pavement, groaning, weapons scattered uselessly. Ryan stood in the middle of it all, the .45 loose at his side, chest heaving once, twice. The gas station was still standing. The town was still sleeping. Ryan looked out toward the empty highway beyond, knowing this wasn't the end. Yet, Voss wasn't the kind of man to let failure slide. The final act was still coming, and Ryan Thatcher, broken, tired, unwilling warrior, would be ready for it. The smoke was still rising when the black Escalade rolled into the station lot, slow and deliberate, engine rumbling like a living thing. Ryan Thatcher stood alone in the wreckage, the broken gas pumps and busted glass littering the ground like discarded chess pieces. His breath misted in the cooling air, but his hands didn't shake. Not anymore. The Escalade parked with a hiss of brakes, the back door opened. Eddie Voss stepped out, dressed in black from boots to jacket, gold chain glinting at his throat. He had the kind of face that's soured with age, thick with entitlement, his smile a permanent sneer. Behind him, 2 more hired guns climbed out, cleaner, meaner than the last batch. These weren't amateurs. These were men who knew what ending someone looked like. Ryan flexed his hands at his sides. Eddie sauntered forward, surveying the battlefield like he was admiring an art project. "Well, bam, Ryan," he drawled. "You really stirred up a hornet's nest, didn't you?" Ryan said nothing. He kept his stance loose, relaxed. "Ready?" Eddie chuckled, shaking his head. "Heard you crawled off somewhere after your little retirement. Figured you'd be dead by now, not running a gas station." Ryan lifted his chin slightly. "Found something worth staying alive for." Eddie's smile thinned. "Shame you're about to lose it." The 2 muscle men shifted, spreading out subtly, trying to box Ryan in without making it obvious. Ryan watched them with peripheral vision, tracking every twitch, every step. "You could have called," Eddie said, tone mock casual. "Could have said you didn't want trouble. Could have made a deal." Ryan shook his head. "There's no deals with men like you." Eddie's face darkened. "You always did think you were better than the rest of us." Ryan took a slow step forward, just one, closing the space between them. "Not better, just tired of cowards hiding behind kids in fear." Eddie's eyes narrowed. The unspoken order hung heavy in the air. The first thug moved, passed a blur of black jacket and raised pistol. Ryan was faster. He shifted sideways, the shot missing by inches, and drove the heel of his hand into the man's throat. A brutal, economical strike. The thug collapsed without a sound. The second came in harder, swinging wild. Ryan ducked low, pivoted, and sent him sprawling into the side of the Escalade with a dull, metallic thud. Now it was just Eddie. No more soldiers to hide behind. Eddie pulled his own gun with trembling hands, pointing it dead at Ryan's chest. Ryan stared him down, steady as a mountain. "You really want to die in a gas station parking lot, Eddie?" Ryan said quietly. Eddie's hands shook harder. His mouth opened, trying to find a threat to spit out, but the words jammed in his throat. From the highway, sirens wailed, loud and close this time. Backup was coming. Eddie's eyes flicked toward the sound. A flash of fear cracked through his facade. Ryan took another step forward. "You could still walk away," Ryan said. "Right now." Eddie's jaw tightened. Pride warred with survival. For a long heartbeat, Ryan wasn't sure which would win. Then Eddie dropped the gun. It clattered to the ground between them, a hollow sound that seemed to echo off the station walls. Ryan kicked it away without ceremony. Sheriff McCoy's cruiser screeched into the lot, lights blazing, dust curling around the tires. Other cruisers followed, forming a jagged perimeter. McCoy was out of her car before it fully stopped, weapon drawn. On the ground, she barked at Eddie. Eddie raised his hands slowly and dropped to his knees, bitterness seething in his bloodshot eyes. The deputies rushed in, cuffing him and the two goons, still conscious enough to groan. Ryan stepped back, letting them take over, feeling a slow exhale bleed out of his lungs. It was over. Really over. McCoy stalked toward him, boots crunching on broken glass. "You all right?" she asked, scanning him for wounds. Ryan nodded. "Nothing I can't walk off." She let out a long breath and holstered her sidearm. "I should be throwing you in cuffs too, you know. All this," she waved a hand at the wrecked lot, "looks like a war zone." Ryan gave her a tired smile. "If I hadn't, you'd be scraping bodies off the floor." She huffed a short laugh. "Fair enough." The deputies hauled Eddie and his men into the cruisers, slamming the doors behind them. The Escalade sat abandoned, an ugly monument to failure. McCoy stood beside Ryan, watching the taillights fade into the dust. "You did good," she said after a moment. Ryan shook his head. "I just stopped something worse." She studied him sideways. "What you going to do now?" Ryan looked out over the fields, the empty road stretching beyond them, the endless sky yawning open like a promise. "I think I'll stay," he said finally. "Fix the station. Maybe plant some roots for once." McCoy smiled. A real one this time, soft and approving. "Town could use a guy like you," she said. Ryan nodded, feeling the truth of it settle deep in his bones. Hudson's Gas wasn't just a place anymore. It was home, and this time he was going to protect it, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. As the sun set, painting the sky in bruised gold and crimson, Mason showed up again, dragging a bucket of paint and a roller. "I figured we could patch the windows," he said, cheeks flushed. Ryan grinned and grabbed a hammer from the workbench. "Let's do it." They worked until the stars came out, laughter and hammer blows echoing into the night, stitching the station back together, one board at a time. The town watched from a distance, safe again, because one quiet man had stood when it mattered. And somewhere deep inside Ryan Thatcher, a piece of him that had been broken for a long, long time finally started to heal. He wasn't a ghost anymore. He was home.